let's kind of focus in on the point while we have the guests here and talk about the education side. The fire side, big deal, big issue. They're taking out a lot of task forces. They're taking out a lot of truck companies, and it's and it is going to affect the city. And maybe next week we'll spend some time talking about that. But let's hit the education side right now.
Well, it's not terribly unrelated. So I would say the long-term answer to the question that you're asking is one about how do you free up commitments to obligations? Because right now in the state, as you know, the state is the agent that moves the most money that is relevant to education. There is not a federal right to an education. There is a state right to an education. And so therefore, in order to free up some money for schools, for teachers, for students, you'd have to change some obligations, and that does involve some restructuring in California. You have to pass some legislation that would allow for things to be rejiggered. What's sort of underlying that question is this property tax issue, this Prop 13 issue, which is a long-standing issue. And without getting into a debate about that particular issue, I think that the bottom line when it comes to these things is, again, we sign some foolish contracts. So, for instance, I'll point you to the fact that everyone now has a smartphone. If you try to go buy a phone that's just a phone, you can't buy one. We are completely wired in as a society. The private sector has gone there 100%. The iPad and the Samsung and the other sort of imitator tablets have brought the revolution of books online, Amazon. Everybody's changing. So the whole market is changing very rapidly. We are still committed to textbooks in California. We're not committing to giving every kid an iPad and giving them access to the information that's online. We need to pass a law in Sacramento. There is one currently proposed by Assemblymember Brownlee to allow school districts to use open source instruction. And so you need to pass a law to allow them to do that. And then you also need to find a way to break a contract that locks us into a series of textbooks in English language arts until 2015 and in terms of math until 2018. So that's led to legislative challenge in Sacramento. A very sort of brief short-term answer to the original question, that is, how do we fund these programs, is we need to get more of that federal money in California.
I agree with you, Scott. And it's interesting because if you look at the matrix, okay, I like to use that word matrix. Look at our leaders, okay? Look at our leaders and ask yourself the question, are our leaders succeeding for our community?
Well, that's why you get to take a look at that question. You get to vote that every X amount of years.
But as people see that and they see who's leading our city of L.A., everybody that listens to K-Rock should absolutely 100% look into their self and ask themselves the question, is our leader, is our mayor doing his job as we speak? Look at your fire stations, look at your community, look at your tax basis, look at our community, and everyone should ask themselves that question.
Well, Darren, everybody has the opportunity to make that choice when it comes up to election time. Hey, man, I'm gonna move on here. I'm gonna give some other people a chance to talk.
Hey, have a good day.
Okay, I appreciate your phone call.
Okay.
Bye-bye now. Going to West L.A., talking to Kurt. Hi, Kurt.
Hi there. I'm wondering if these folks have done any research, looked into the fact that these children are disadvantaged before ever going into school because they're like children born unto children, that much of the Latino population has children when they're like 15, and parents themselves haven't had the opportunity to self-actualize, and so they don't know how important it is to emphasize the need for education unto their children.
Okay, good question.
We have looked at the research, especially focusing from the early care and education. That's why those programs and services are extremely important, because those do help narrow the achievement gap as to once they start elementary and middle school. So we have seen the research that says that a lot of, and it's not just only for Latino communities, it's in general for socioeconomically disadvantaged communities.
And I think we got to, we make the mistake once, okay, don't make the mistake again, twice, consistently. We got to teach in school and in the home that having a child at 15 years old is a bad plan. It's just a bad plan. And if we just let it happen without teaching, without educating, it's going to perpetuate. So, lots of stuff comes down to the school and to the home. Good point, Kurt. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now. Canoga Park. Hey, Jeff, thank you for calling.
Hey, thanks, Scott, for having me. Thank you for having me. Okay, I just have a quick micro point, a very small point. Here's the thing. every school, almost every school in LAUSD has about 70% Hispanic in terms of their population. So most of the parents don't speak English. Every school, or just about every school, needs a translation system, a good translation system, so that Spanish people can communicate with English people. And a lot of times it's like in downtown LA or mid-cities, it's Korean people. There's a very heavy sector of Korean people, and they can't communicate with the administrators or their teachers. Every school has to have, and it's an expensive
Well,
system.
we do that. I think we do a bad job at this overall. Instead
job.
of teaching people to speak English, we cater to people's languages and don't put things in English. I mean,
you're not going to move mountains. These people
it's crazy.
Aren't going to change.
But
you've got to cater to them. Otherwise, you're not going to educate
free
their
adult
people.
education, I think, is one of the answers. I just think that if the parents can't teach the children English, they have to then provide on the entire school. And if you're sitting there the entire semester teaching English, what else are you teaching? Where's the time going?
But if you're going to spend, you're right. If you're going to spend all your time teaching them English, that's all you're going to do, and it doesn't tend to work because they don't get immersed in the home.
Well, here's the thing: the one thing that will never change, that we have, and that we've had since I was born, and you were born, and everyone was born, and we still have today, is 24 hours in the day. And how you slice up those 24 hours, you make that decision. Yeah, and you better do it wisely, because even though 24 hours seems like a good amount of time, it's not.
I can't argue with you there. However, I guess my point goes back, and I guess your first caller, Darren, just spoke about every major thing that you could ever talk about. And my point is, every school should have available for their afternoon or meetings with teachers and parents a translation system so people can communicate, because it's important, because people don't understand each other when you're sitting there trying to figure it out without a translation system, because you mess up the words.
Yeah. Well,
anyway,
technology is making that more and more available. You go to a site and you go to Google and you could translate the entire site in like 5 seconds. So hopefully something like that.
That isn't available to a teacher.
Not yet.
Speaking after school.
Not yet.
But they have things that are available. They're decent Sennheiser equipment that's available. There's not too much stuff out there. I've been involved in this in a lot of ways. In the old days, they used to have a translation system that when you turned on the lights, the fluorescent lights, it screwed it up. They went through a lot of trial and error. They have some decent systems out there. Every school should have a translation system so that when a parent comes in and they can't communicate, that somebody can come in and help them.
Well, that's a really interesting point, and I appreciate you making it this morning.
I also appreciate the fact that you bring up the notion of language issues. It's actually more than just, I think people forget how many other language groups there are in Los Angeles, and the notion that we have to be able to communicate a message to every single family is a very important one and a very fair one. But beyond the fact that we expect everyone to learn English, I think that the problem is the opportunities with which we have to get there. I mean, on the one hand, I would say, if just knowing English were the answer, then there wouldn't be a racial achievement gap, and you wouldn't see the African-American community suffer the way that it suffers. There still are other issues of poverty and school safety and not having effective educators in front of the classrooms that need them most. In addition, you'd be surprised despite the fact that there's a lot of rhetoric about the sense of entitlement that immigrants have, we haven't seen that sense of entitlement. We actually have to teach people to have a sense of entitlement, to ask questions as to why it is that their classrooms don't have the resources they need to succeed, why it is that questions haven't been answered in terms of school safety, in terms of materials, in terms of achievement, in terms of tests. And one of the very, very disappointing and tragic things is that we've done research groups where we talk to teachers and talk to parents coming in and out of parent-teacher conferences. And we ask the parents, how did that parent-teacher conference go? Did you get the information you needed? And they say, yes, yes, yes. We ask the teacher, do you have faith that, this parent and this family are going to implement what you've given them and that this child is going to get to college? And the teacher says no. So there's a difference in expectations where, families, again, through no fault of their own, they're being proactive, they're going to school, they're making calls, they're showing an interest in their children's learning, and they're not receiving the information they need for their children to be successful, or they're facing a teacher or a principal that has very low expectations of what they're capable of doing. And then I think that you can tell that the writing is on the wall. There are many, many studies, even by companies like McKinsey, about how serious this problem is, where people set expectations as early as third grade. And they look at 8-year-old children and they say, these children are going to go to college or these children are going to go to jail.
One of your goals of the Alliance for a Better Community is that all students will graduate from high school. That's saying a lot. That's a giant expectation. Yeah, the graduation rates now are not close to 100%. And if you can achieve that, you've achieved wonders.
Well, again, I'm sure Ofelia would say that if we can get 100% of children into preschool, we can get 100% of children to be high school graduates, and the research is on her side. And in addition, the notion of having 100% of people receive an education that allows them to either have the option to go to college or to get a job in a 21st century economy, that doesn't seem like an expectation. That seems much more like a right to us.
Preschool. Let's talk about that for a second. Preschool is not a requirement by the school district or by the law, is it? It's optional. Preschool and nursery school, the first grade that you are required to attend is kindergarten. Am I right?
You're right. You're extremely right. It's not a requirement by the state of California. Kindergarten is a requirement. The state of California tried to make preschool for all a couple of years ago, but unfortunately we weren't successful in doing that. So as a result, it's kindergarten who the first grade that the children are required to attend. But that doesn't dismiss the effect of preschool.
No, I mean, it's unfortunate.
Right, and it is unfortunate, especially because, early education definitely does not begin at preschool, even from infants and toddlers. There's a lot of research around the brain development and the effects of language development and linguistic development at an early age that really attribute to the academic success of children at the preschool level and then at the kindergarten level.
So what I hear, as I hear you saying this and the things that filter in my brain, is bringing up a child is a responsibility and a job. You don't do it unless you're prepared to do it, unless you want to have a child that's going to be disadvantaged. If you want an advantaged child who's going to do well and succeed, you got to be part of that growing up.
Yes, you do. And even from the prenatal stage all the way to making sure that the children receive the support needed both at the home, at the school, and even from the caregiver, whether it's at an early care and education center, or even if it's the grandma or the aunt making the care for the children. A child needs to be developmentally challenged at an early stage so that those gains really pass on to elementary and high school.
Keep a kid curious.
Yes.
Okay, so your website is the Alliance for a Better Community, www.afabc.org. What are people going to find on that website?
So
go ahead.
So on that website, you'll find our contact information for all of our staff members, not only Unai and myself, but more than anything, you'll find a lot of the work that ABC has done for the past couple of 10 years since our inception. And you'll also find ways that you can contact the work that we do to really get involved in terms of the work that we've been doing around education and policy for LAUSD and the statewide as well.
Yeah, and you'll see that we've covered the gambit. So we've gone to Sacramento and had conversations with Washington, D.C. about what education policy should look like, what the ESEA, or No Child Left Behind as we know it, should look like when it's reauthorized. And, of course, in the local level, we are in the schools, in the communities, working with parents. So we've covered the whole pipeline as best we can in the effort to reform education laws.
And where's your funding coming from?
Foundations, mostly foundations, yeah. Okay,
so that's good. You see, because obviously everything takes funding now, and dollars are hard to come by. Well, Unai and Ofelia, I appreciate you coming in this morning. Again, www.afabc.org, the Alliance for a Better Community, nonprofit organization, seemingly wanting to do a lot of good things. I hope it all works out. I think it's going to take a lot of time. You have big, bright goals. Everybody graduating from high school and lots of really wonderful, bright goals. Let's make them all happen.
Definitely. I think we definitely have to start with at least having great expectations for our children so that if we all start believing that children, it is possible for them to go to preschool, it is possible for them to graduate high school and go on to a successful career in college, then it definitely makes sense for all of us to start believing in that.
Well, we can only make it happen if we all work together, and I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much for having us.